The Great Hall of the Galactic Council had never known such silence. For 12,000 years, this chamber had witnessed the rise and fall of empires, the birth of alliances, and the resolution of conflicts that could have destroyed entire star systems. But today, the 97 species that made up the council sat incomplete. Stillness as Ambassador Kethrall of the Valari walked slowly to the central platform, his bioluminescent skin flickered with patterns of deep blue and sickly yellow, colors that every species present understood without translation. Fear, despair, hopelessness. Kethrall activated the holographic display, and the chamber filled with images of destruction. Planets reduced to barren rocks. Fleets scattered like dust in a storm. Billions of lives erased as if they had never existed. The Drekker swarm has consumed 17 systems in the outer spiral arm, he announced, his voice barely steady. The Valari homeworld of Thesan Prime is now directly in their path. We have 3 standard cycles before they arrive. The insectoid Mirethi delegate rose on her 6 legs, her mandibles clicking in agitation. What of the combined defense fleet? We sent 4,000 ships to stop them at the Korath Nebula. Gone, Kethrall replied simply. All of them. The Drekker did not even slow down. A low moan spread through the chamber. The Gorthians, massive beings of stone and metal, lowered their heads in a gesture of mourning. The crystalline Sarati hummed at frequencies that cracked the decorative panels on the walls. Even the ancient Pelori, who had seen civilizations rise and fall, seemed to shrink in their seats. High Chancellor Yuvan rose slowly from his throne. His feathered crest, once brilliant gold, had long since turned silver with age. He had led the council for 300 years, guiding them through crisis after crisis. But as he looked out at the assembled delegates, he felt something he had never experienced in all his long life. He felt defeated. "We have tried everything," he said, his voice echoing through the suddenly quiet chamber. "We have thrown our greatest fleets against them. We have deployed weapons that could shatter moons. We have attempted negotiation, offered tribute, even tried to reason with the hive mind. Nothing has worked. The Drekker do not stop. They do not negotiate. They simply consume. Then, what do?" demanded the Sarati representative. "Do we simply wait to be devoured?" Yuvan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "There is one option we have not yet considered. One species we have deliberately avoided for 200 cycles." The chamber seemed to grow colder. Every delegate knew exactly what species he meant. "You cannot be serious," hissed the Mirethi delegate. "The humans are savages, monsters. We quarantined them for good reason." "Yes," Yvonne agreed. "We did. But perhaps that is exactly why we need them now." The holographic display shifted, showing a small blue and green planet orbiting a yellow star, Earth. The humans called it home. For 200 years, the Council had maintained a blockade around their solar system, preventing them from spreading into the galaxy. The discovery of humanity had been an accident. A routine survey ship had stumbled upon their transmissions, and what they found had terrified the Council to its core. Here was a species that had spent its entire existence at war with itself. They had fought over land, over resources, over ideas. They had developed weapons capable of destroying their own world, and had come close to using them on multiple occasions. But what truly frightened the Council was not their violence. It was their creativity in violence. Every other species in the galaxy had developed weapons as a means of defense, tools of last resort when all other options had failed. Humans had turned warfare into an art form. They had developed tactics and strategies that no other species had ever conceived. They had created weapons that could kill in ways the Council had never imagined. Within a single generation of discovering faster than light travel, They had begun expanding into nearby systems. The Council had acted quickly, establishing the quarantine before they could spread further. For 2 centuries, humanity had been locked away, a monster in a cage. We sealed them away because they were dangerous. The Gorthian representative rumbled, his voice like grinding boulders. You would release that danger now? The Drekker are more dangerous, Yevon replied. At least with humans, there's a chance of communication. A chance of negotiation. The Drekker offer nothing but extinction. Kethril stepped forward, his skin shifting to colors of uncertainty. I have studied the humans extensively, Chancellor. Their history is indeed violent, but it is not without hope. They are capable of great cruelty, yes, but also great compassion. They form bonds with other species, even with animals on their own world. They create art and music. They dream of the stars. They also developed nuclear weapons and pointed them at their own cities, the Mirathi delegate interjected. And then they chose not to use them, Kethril countered. For all their violence, they have always found a way to step back from the brink. That speaks to something within them, something we might be able to reach. The debate raged for hours. Some delegates argued that releasing humanity would simply trade one threat for another. Others pointed out that the humans had been isolated for 200 years, plenty of time to become even more dangerous. A few even suggested that extinction at the hands of the Drekker might be preferable to whatever the humans would do. But in the end, it came down to a simple truth. The Drekker were coming. Nothing the Council had tried had stopped them. Nothing in their arsenal, nothing in their vast accumulated knowledge offered any hope of survival. The humans were a gamble, yes, an enormous, terrifying gamble. But they were the only gamble left. The vote was called at midnight. One by one, the delegates cast their decisions into the central recorder. When the final tally was announced, even Yevon seemed surprised. Unanimous. Every single species had voted yes. Then it is decided, the Chancellor announced, his voice heavy with the weight of what they were about to do. We will lift the quarantine. We will make contact with humanity. We will ask for their help. He paused, looking out at the assembled delegates. And may the stars have mercy on us all if we are wrong. As the council session ended and the delegates filed out of the chamber, Kethril remained behind. He stared at the holographic image of Earth still floating above the central platform. Such a small world. Such a young species. And yet they had terrified the entire galaxy into locking them away. Now that cage was about to be opened. Kethril wondered if anyone truly understood what that meant. He had studied humans more than any other being in the council. He had watched their broadcasts, analyzed their history, tried to understand their strange and contradictory nature. He believed they could be reasoned with. He believed they would help. But deep in his heart, in the place where instinct lived, he felt something that his studies could not explain away. He was afraid. Not of what the humans might do to the council, but of what they might do to the Drekker. Because if the humans were everything the stories said they were, then the galaxy was about to witness something it had never seen before. True predators at work. Commander Daniel Burke had spent 20 years watching the stars from behind invisible bars. Every day, he stood on the observation deck of Earth Station Alpha and stared at the distant patrol ships that marked the boundary of humanity's prison. They were always there, those alien vessels, circling endlessly like sharks around a wounded swimmer. In 2 decades, not a single one had responded to any human transmission. No greetings, no warnings, no explanations. Just silence and the constant reminder that humanity was not welcome in the galaxy. When the alien ship appeared at the edge of the quarantine zone broadcasting a request for communication, Daniel thought his sensors were malfunctioning. Run the diagnostic again, he ordered his communications officer, Lieutenant Amy Crawford. I've run it 3 times. "Sir," she replied, her voice shaking slightly. "The signal is real. They're asking to speak with us. And, sir, they're using our language." Daniel leaned forward in his chair, studying the elegant vessel on his screen. It was clearly Velari design, all flowing curves and bioluminescent panels. But unlike the cold, silent patrol ships, this one was reaching out. What exactly are they saying? They're requesting permission to send a diplomatic envoy to Earth. They say it's a matter of galactic importance. Amy paused, listening to her earpiece. "Sir, they're saying please." Within hours, the news had spread across the planet. After 200 years of isolation, the aliens wanted to talk. The United Nations convened an emergency session. Military forces around the world went on high alert. Billions of people stopped whatever they were doing and watched the sky. The Velari shuttle landed in Geneva 3 days later. Ambassador Kethro stepped out onto human soil and found himself facing a wall of cameras, soldiers and curious onlookers. He had prepared himself for hostility. What he found instead was something far more unsettling. They were studying him, analyzing him, learning. Secretary General Linda Morrison met him at the entrance to the UN headquarters. She was a small woman with graying hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. When she extended her hand in the human gesture of greeting, Kethro hesitated only a moment before taking it. Her grip was firm, confident, not the grip of a prisoner meeting her jailer, but of an equal meeting a potential ally. "Ambassador Kethro," she said, her voice perfectly controlled. "Welcome to Earth. I understand you have something important to discuss." The meeting took place in a secure chamber deep beneath the UN building. Kethro faced a long table filled with human leaders. Politicians, scientists, military commanders. All of them watching him with that same unsettling intensity. He told them everything. The Drekker swarm. The fallen systems. The desperate vote of the Council. As he spoke, holographic images filled the room. The nightmare creatures that had consumed 17 civilizations. The broken remains of Council fleets. The projected path of the swarm through the galaxy. When he finished, the room was silent. Then Secretary General Morrison spoke. "Let me make sure I understand correctly. For 200 years, you locked our entire species in our own solar system because you were afraid of us. You watched us, studied us, but never spoke to us. And now, because you're facing something you can't defeat on your own, you want our help." Kethral's skin shifted to deep purple, the Velari color of shame. "Yes, that is an accurate summary. And if we refuse, then the Drekker will eventually reach your system as well. The quarantine will mean nothing. You will be consumed along with everyone else." A man in military uniform leaned forward. General Kevin Price had spent his entire career preparing for a war against the very aliens now begging for assistance. His face was weathered, his eyes hard. But when he spoke, his voice held professional curiosity rather than anger. "Tell me about these Drekker. How do they fight? What are their tactics?" Kethral produced more holographic images. "They are a hive species. No individual intelligence, only the collective mind. They feel nothing. No fear, no pain, no hesitation. Their ships are grown from organic matter, not built. They consume all biological material to fuel their reproduction. And they attack in swarms, overwhelming defenders with sheer numbers. How have Council forces engaged them? We form defensive lines around populated worlds. We attempt to minimize civilian casualties. We fight with honor and discipline." General Price actually laughed. The sound was harsh and humorless. "There's your problem right there." Kethral's patterns shifted in confusion. "I do not understand. You're fighting defensively, protecting territory, trying to hold ground." Price shook his head. "Against an enemy that doesn't care about losses, that strategy is suicide. They'll just keep throwing bodies at you until you run out of ammunition. Then what would you suggest? Price leaned back in his chair, exchanging glances with the other military commanders in the room. A silent conversation passed between them. Years of training and doctrine communicated in mere seconds. You don't defend against a swarm, Price finally said. You go on the attack. You hit them where they're weak. You disrupt their communications, destroy their supply lines, target their breeding grounds. You make them react to you instead of the other way around. But the casualties, Kethro protested. Such aggressive tactics would result in enormous losses. Losses happen in war. The question is whether those losses buy you something. Your defensive strategy is losing ships for nothing. At least offensive operations would put pressure on the enemy. Secretary General Morrison raised a hand for silence. Before we discuss tactics, we need to discuss terms. You're asking humanity to fight your war for you. What do we get in return? What do you want? Freedom. The quarantine ends permanently. Humanity becomes a full member of the galactic community, with all the rights and privileges that entails. Access to technology, trade routes, diplomatic recognition. That can be arranged. I'm not finished. We also want an apology. Cathral's skin flickered with surprise. An apology? You imprisoned our entire species for 200 years based on what we might do. You judged us without ever speaking to us. You denied us the stars because you were afraid. Morrison's voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath the words. That was wrong. Before we shed a single drop of human blood for your cause, we want acknowledgement of that. The chamber was silent. Every human present watched the alien ambassador, waiting for his response. Kethro could feel the weight of their attention, the barely contained frustration of a species that had been caged for generations. He thought about the Council's fears. He thought about the surveillance recordings, the analysis of human wars, the carefully documented evidence of their violent nature. All of it had seemed so reasonable at the time, so necessary. But standing here now, facing these people who had every right to hate him, he saw something the Council had missed. Yes, humans were capable of terrible violence, but they were also capable of restraint. They could have attacked the quarantine ships at any time. They had the weapons, the determination, the anger. Instead, they had waited. They had watched. They had prepared. You are right, he said finally. What we did was wrong. We acted out of fear, and fear is a poor foundation for justice. On behalf of the Galactic Council, I apologize to the people of Earth. Morrison studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Then let's talk about how we're going to win this war. The negotiations lasted 3 days. When they were finished, humanity had something it had dreamed of for 2 centuries. A place in the galaxy. General Price began mobilizing forces immediately. Ships that had been built in secret, weapons that had been designed for a war against alien oppressors, troops that had trained for battles they never expected to fight. All of it was finally going to be used, just not against the enemy. Anyone had anticipated as the first human warships prepared to leave the solar system. Price stood beside Commander Burke on the observation deck of Earth Station Alpha. 20 years you've been staring at those patrol ships, Price said. How does it feel to finally fly past them? Burke watched as the alien vessels moved aside, creating a gap in the quarantine line for the first time in 200 years. Ask me after we've won, he replied. Then I'll know if it was worth the wait. The Galactic Council had expected humans to be dangerous. They had prepared themselves for aggression, for violence, for the savage nature that their surveillance had documented for 2 centuries. What they had not prepared for was efficiency. Admiral Patricia Vance commanded the first expeditionary fleet from the bridge of the USS Liberty. She was a tall woman with short gray hair and eyes that seemed to calculate threat assessments with every glance. Behind her vessel stretched 200 warships of various classes, each one bristling with weapons that the Council had never seen before. "Admiral, we're receiving tactical data from Valari Command," reported her executive officer, Commander Greg Palmer. "The Drekker main swarm is engaging the combined Council fleet at the Thesan system. Current estimates show the Council losing approximately 12 ships per hour. Time until total fleet destruction? At current rates, approximately 14 hours. And our arrival time at maximum speed? 18 hours. Vance studied the holographic display, watching the blue markers of Council ships wink out one by one as red Drekker signatures overwhelmed them. The Council was fighting exactly as Catherall had described. Defensive formations, coordinated retreats, desperate last stands. It was like watching children try to hold back a flood with their bare hands. "Get me High Chancellor Yvonne." The ancient Polori appeared on screen moments later. His feathers were disheveled, his crest drooping with exhaustion. Behind him, Vance could see the chaos of a command center under siege. "Admiral Vance," he said, relief evident in his voice. "Your fleet cannot arrive soon enough. We are being overwhelmed. I can see that. Chancellor, I need you to do something for me. Something that will seem insane. At this point, I am willing to consider anything. Order your ships to break formation. Tell them to scatter in all directions. Maximum speed, maximum dispersal." Yvonne's crest flattened in shock. That would expose the civilian population of Thesan to direct attack. 12 billion people live on that world. Yes, it would. But it would also draw the Drekker swarm into pursuit. They can't resist fleeing prey. It's hardwired into their hunting instincts. They'll split up to chase your ships, spreading their forces thin across a massive volume of space. And then what? And then we hit them from behind while they're scattered. Instead of fighting a concentrated swarm, we engage thousands of smaller groups. Divide and conquer. You want us to use our own people as bait. Vance's expression did not change. "I want to win. The Drekker are going to reach Thesan regardless of what you do. The only question is whether your fleet dies protecting empty space or buys us the tactical advantage we need to actually save those 12 billion people." There was silence on the channel. Vance could see Yvonne struggling with the decision, everything in his nature rebelling against the cold mathematics of her proposal. The Council species had evolved past such brutal calculations. They believed in honor, in sacrifice, in noble last stands. Humans had evolved differently. "How certain are you that this will work?" Yvonne finally asked. "Certain enough to bet the lives of my own crew on it." Another long pause. Then Yvonne straightened, his crest rising with new determination. "All Council ships, this is High Chancellor Yvonne. Break formation immediately. Maximum dispersal. Run for your lives." The Council fleet shattered like glass. Ships that had been holding formation suddenly scattered in every direction, engines burning at maximum power as they fled the battlefield. The Drekker swarm, sensing weakness, responded exactly as Vance had predicted. They gave chase. The massive concentration of enemy vessels, fragmented into thousands of smaller hunting packs, each one pursuing fleeing Council ships across light years of space. Within hours, the swarm that had been unstoppable tide became scattered points of light, spread across an enormous volume. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace directly in the center of the dispersed enemy. "All ships," Vance commanded, "weapons free." What followed was not a battle. It was a massacre. Human ships moved through the scattered Drekker packs with surgical precision. Missiles designed to penetrate organic hulls tore through enemy vessels. Energy weapons developed in secret laboratories burned through chitin and flesh. Tactics refined over centuries of human warfare were applied against an enemy that had never faced such coordinated aggression. The Drekker tried to regroup. Their hive mind screamed commands across the void, ordering scattered hunting packs to converge on the human threat. But every time they began to concentrate, human ships would strike from unexpected angles, breaking up formations before they could solidify. It was chaos. Beautiful, terrible, perfectly orchestrated chaos. Kethral watched from the bridge of a Velari cruiser that had stopped its flight to observe. His skin shifted through colors that had no translation as he witnessed something the galaxy had never seen. Humans at war. They did not fight with honor. They did not give their enemies fair chances. They attacked from ambush, retreated when outnumbered, and returned when the odds shifted in their favor. They used every trick, every deception, every underhanded tactic that their violent history had taught them, and they were winning. "Ambassador," said the Velari captain beside him, "I am receiving reports from across the sector. The human fleet has destroyed over 60% of the swarm. The remaining Drekker are attempting to flee." Kethral's patterns shifted to pale yellow, the color of fear. Not of the Drekker, of the humans. 60%, he repeated. In less than 30 hours, they have accomplished what the combined council fleets could not do in 3 years. Should we pursue the fleeing enemy? Before Kethral could respond, a new transmission came through. Admiral Vance's face appeared on the view screen, her expression showing the exhaustion of sustained combat, but also something else: satisfaction. "All council vessels. This is Admiral Vance. The immediate threat to Thiessen has been neutralized. We are allowing the surviving Drekker to retreat." "Allowing them?" the Velari captain asked in confusion. "Why not finish them?" "Because I want them to report back to the main hive. I want every Drekker in the galaxy to know what happened here today. Fear is a weapon too, Captain. And right now, we're teaching the swarm how to feel it." The transmission ended. Kethral stared at the screen for a long moment, processing what he had just witnessed. The humans had not merely defeated the Drekker. They had done so while deliberately leaving survivors. Not out of mercy, but out of strategy. They were playing a longer game than anyone had realized. Around the Thiessen system, scattered council ships began returning from their desperate flight. One by one, they rejoined the fleet, their crews staring in amazement at the debris fields that marked where the Drekker swarm had been. Many of them had expected to die today. Instead, they were alive, saved by the very species they had imprisoned for 2 centuries. The irony was not lost on anyone. Admiral Vance transmitted new coordinates to the assembled fleet. The main Drekker hive was 3 sectors away, still processing resources from conquered worlds. The survivors of today's battle would reach it within days, spreading terror through the collective mind. "We move in 72 hours, Vance announced. "That should give the swarm enough time to panic. In the meantime, all ships conduct repairs and resupply." This was just the opening move. On the bridge of the Liberty, Commander Palmer approached Vance as she studied tactical displays. "Admiral, we lost 43 ships in the engagement. Over 6,000 crew members. I know. The Council is already sending messages of congratulation. They're calling it the greatest victory in galactic history." Vance looked at him, her eyes tired but determined. "It's not a victory until the Drekker are destroyed completely. Everything we did today was preparation. The real war starts now." She turned back to the displays, already planning the next engagement. Around her, human crew members worked with quiet efficiency, processing the cost of battle while preparing for more to come. They had come to the galaxy as prisoners released from a cage. Now they were showing exactly why that cage had been built in the first place. And they were just getting started. The war against the Drekker swarm had entered its 2nd year when Ambassador Kethral finally understood what made humans truly terrifying. He had watched them fight, He had seen their tactics, studied their weapons, analyzed their strategies. But it was in the medical bay of the USS Liberty, in the quiet moments between battles, that he discovered the truth. Admiral Patricia Vance sat beside a young ensign, whose legs had been crushed when a Drekker boarding pod breached his section of the ship. The damage was too severe for regeneration. He would spend the rest of his life in a mobility chair. Kethril expected the Admiral to offer quick condolences and move on. She had a fleet to command, a war to win. The fate of one wounded soldier should have been insignificant in the larger picture. Instead, she stayed for nearly an hour. The prosthetics they're developing at the Luna facility are incredible, she told the ensign, whose name was Ryan Collins. Full neural integration. You'll be able to walk, run, even dance if you want to. Might take some adjustment, but you'll get there. Will I be able to serve again, Admiral? Ryan asked, his voice barely steady. Son, you just helped hold off a boarding action that saved 300 crew members. You can serve however you want for the rest of your life. That's not a question. She gripped his hand firmly, looking directly into his eyes. What you did mattered. You matter. Don't ever forget that. Kethril waited until the Admiral left the medical bay before approaching her. They walked together through the corridors of the ship, passing crew members who nodded respectfully as Vance passed. I wanted to understand something, Kethril said, his patterns shifting through uncertain colors. Your tactics are brutal. You sacrifice ships and lives without apparent hesitation. Use deception and manipulation as freely as weapons. And yet you just spent an hour comforting a single wounded soldier as if he were the most important person in the galaxy. He is important. They all are. I do not understand how those two things can coexist. Either lives matter or they do not. Either sacrifice is painful or it is merely calculation. Vance stopped walking. They stood in the junction between corridors, the hum of the ship's engines vibrating through the deck plates beneath their feet. When she looked at Kethril, her eyes held something he had never seen in any Council species. Ambassador, do you know why the Council species never developed effective warfare? We evolved beyond such barbarism. No, you evolved to avoid such barbarism. There's a difference. She leaned against the bulkhead, suddenly looking very tired. Your species developed in environments where cooperation was the key to survival. Conflict was costly, so you found ways to resolve disputes without violence. Over millions of years, you bred the capacity for warfare out of yourselves. And humans? Humans evolved on a world where everything was trying to kill us. Predators disease each other. We survived not by avoiding conflict, but by becoming better at it than anything else. We developed the capacity to love deeply and kill efficiently at the same time, because both were necessary for survival. She began walking again, and Kethril followed. Every soldier on this ship knows they might die tomorrow. They accept that because they believe in what we're fighting for. And I accept sending them to their deaths because I know the alternative is worse. But accepting something doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. So you feel the loss of every soldier? Every single one. I know their names, their stories, their families. When they die, a piece of me dies with them. Her voice grew harder. And then I order the next attack anyway, because that's what leadership means. Carrying the weight of those deaths while still making the decisions that cause more of them. They reached an observation deck overlooking the fleet. Hundreds of ships hung in formation, human and Council vessels mixed together. In 2 years of war, the Alliance had grown closer than anyone had expected. Council species were learning to fight alongside humans, adopting their tactics, absorbing their ruthlessness. The Drekker have no such burden, Kethril observed. They feel nothing when their swarms are destroyed. Perhaps that is an advantage. No, Ambassador. That's their greatest weakness. Vance pointed toward the distant stars where Drekker territory began. They don't understand sacrifice because they don't understand love. They can't comprehend why someone would die to protect another. It makes them predictable. Predictable how? They assume every species will act in its own self-interest. They can't imagine a soldier throwing herself on a grenade to save her companions. They can't conceive of a fleet fighting to the last ship to protect civilians they've never met. Every time we do something that seems irrational by their standards, it catches them off guard. A communication alert sounded. Commander Palmer's voice came through the ship's speakers. Admiral, long-range sensors have detected a massive Drekker formation moving toward the Mirithi colonies. Estimated strength is 40,000 vessels. Vance straightened immediately, the tired philosopher vanishing behind the mask of command. Time to intercept? If we leave now, we can reach them in 6 hours. But Admiral, our forces are depleted. We can field maybe 8,000 ships. What's the Council fleet strength? Another 12,000, but they're mostly defensive vessels, not designed for offensive operations. Kethral watched as Vance processed this information. 20,000 ships against 40,000. The odds were terrible. The logical decision would be to retreat, consolidate forces, wait for a better opportunity. Admiral, he said carefully, surely you cannot intend to engage with such unfavorable numbers. The Mirithi colonies have a population of 6 billion, she replied. If we don't engage, they'll be consumed. But the losses would be catastrophic, perhaps even decisive. Vance looked at him, and he saw something in her eyes that made his skin patterns shift to colors he couldn't control. It wasn't anger or determination. It was acceptance. Ambassador, let me tell you a story. 300 years ago, on Earth, there was a battle at a place called Thermopylae. 300 soldiers held a narrow pass against an army of hundreds of thousands. They knew they would die. They fought anyway, buying time for their people to prepare defenses. Did they succeed? They all died. Every single one. But they held that pass for 3 days, and the time they bought changed the course of history. You would sacrifice your entire fleet for a delaying action? I would sacrifice everything I have to save 6 billion lives. She turned to the communications panel. All ships, prepare for emergency departure. We move in 20 minutes. The fleet rallied with terrifying speed. Human and Council ships broke orbit together, forming into attack formations as they entered hyperspace. Kethral found himself on the bridge of the Liberty, watching as Vance coordinated the impossible battle that lay ahead. Admiral, he said as the countdown to engagement began, I finally understand what makes humans dangerous. Oh? And what is that? You are not dangerous because you can kill without feeling. You are dangerous because you feel everything, and you fight anyway. Your love makes you terrifying because there is nothing you will not sacrifice to protect it. Vance smiled, a thin expression that held no humor. Welcome to humanity, Ambassador. Try to keep up. The fleet dropped out of hyperspace directly in the path of the Drekker swarm. 40,000 enemy vessels spread across the void like a living storm, already beginning to shift toward the human formation. All ships, Vance announced, her voice carrying across the combined fleet. Today, we hold the line. Today, we show the galaxy what humanity is made of. Today, we fight not for victory, but for the lives behind us. She paused, looking at the overwhelming enemy before them. Give them hell. The battle began. The war against the Drekker lasted 4 years. It was not a clean victory. Humanity lost ships, colonies, and millions of lives. The Council species suffered as well, learning to fight in ways that their peaceful natures had never imagined. But together, they endured. The Battle of Mirithi became legend. 20,000 allied ships against 40,000 Drekker. Admiral Vance led the charge personally, her flagship sustaining damage that should have destroyed it 3 times over. When reinforcements finally arrived 18 hours later, the Allied fleet had been reduced to less than 5,000 vessels, but the Drekker had lost over 30,000 ships. And the Marathi colonies stood untouched. After that day, the war changed. Council species that had fought defensively for centuries began to embrace human tactics. The Marathi, once pacifistic traders, became devastating guerrilla fighters. The massive Gorthians trained in close-quarters combat that turned their bodies into weapons. Even the crystalline Sarati modified themselves to emit frequencies that disrupted Drekker communications. The galaxy was learning to fight, and humans were teaching them. By the 3rd year, the Drekker were in retreat for the first time in their existence. Their expansion had stopped. Their swarms were being hunted rather than hunting. The hive mind, which had never known fear, began to experience something new and terrible. It began to panic. The final battle took place at the Drekker homeworld. Intelligence gathered over years of war had revealed the location of the primary hive, the nexus point where the collective consciousness was centered. Destroy that, and the entire species would collapse into disorganized fragments. The combined fleet numbered 10,000 ships from 43 species. But everyone knew who was leading the charge. Admiral Patricia Vance stood on the bridge of the Liberty, now scarred from countless battles but still flying. Her hair had gone completely white. Scars marked her face and hands, but her eyes remained sharp, calculating, ready. Commander Palmer, who had served beside her through every engagement, approached with a tactical display. Admiral, we're in position. The Drekker defensive fleet is approximately 60,000 strong. They've pulled everything they have left back to protect the homeworld. Then there's nowhere left for them to run. Vance studied the planet on the main screen. It was a nightmare world of organic spires and breeding pits, the birthplace of a species that had consumed countless civilizations. Status of the Council task forces? All in position. The Marathi strike teams are ready to execute diversionary attacks. The Gorthian heavy cruisers will punch through the defensive line, and the Sarati communications jammers are charged and waiting. Casualties projection? High, very high. But if we succeed, this ends today. Vance nodded slowly. She had known this moment would come. For 4 years, she had led the fight against an enemy that felt nothing. Now she would end it, one way or another. Open a channel to all ships. Her image appeared on screens across the combined fleet. Human and alien faces alike turned to watch, waiting for her words. 4 years ago, I was asked to fight a war for a galaxy that had imprisoned my people. I accepted because I believed that what we were fighting for mattered more than what had been done to us. Today, I know I was right. She paused, looking at the planet that filled her view screen. Every species in this fleet has lost something in this war. Friends, family, homeworlds. The Drekker took from all of us, and today we take it back. Not with hatred, but with determination. Not with vengeance, but with purpose. When this battle ends, the Drekker threat will be finished forever. We will have proven that the galaxy can stand united against any enemy. And we will have shown that humanity, the species you once feared enough to lock away, chose to fight for you when it mattered most. Her voice grew stronger. Whatever happens today, remember why we're here. Not for glory, not for conquest, but for the trillions of lives we've already saved, and the countless more we'll save by ending this now. Give everything you have. Fight like the future depends on it, because it does. All ships, begin the attack. The battle was brutal. 60,000 Drekker vessels threw themselves at the Allied fleet with the desperation of a species fighting for survival. For the first time, the swarm fought with something beyond instinct. It fought with fear. Human tactics had spread throughout the Allied forces. Marathi strike wings executed complex attack patterns. Gorthian cruisers absorbed damage that would have destroyed lighter vessels and kept fighting. Sarati ships disrupted Drekker coordination at critical moments. And at the center of it all, the Liberty led the charge. The battle lasted 2 days. 2 days of constant combat, of ships dying in flames, of lives sacrificed for inches of progress. Slowly, relentlessly, the Allied fleet pushed through the Drekker defenses. When they finally achieved orbit over the homeworld, only 3,000 Allied ships remained operational. The Drekker had been reduced to scattered remnants, still fighting with mindless aggression but no longer coordinated. "Admiral," Palmer reported, his voice hoarse from exhaustion, "we have weapons lock on the primary hive structure." Vance stared at the organic spire that rose from the planet's surface. Within that structure was the collective consciousness of an entire species. Billions of minds linked together, experiencing reality as one unified whole. In some ways, it was a form of immortality. In a few moments, it would be nothing. All ships begin orbital bombardment. Leave nothing alive. It took 2 days to sterilize the planet. When it was over, the Drekker were extinct. The celebrations began immediately. On the Council homeworld, billions of beings danced in the streets. Holographic images of Admiral Vance appeared everywhere, hailed as the savior of the galaxy. Human soldiers were embraced by species that had once feared them. But Vance did not attend the celebrations. Secretary General Linda Morrison found her in the ready room of the Liberty, staring out at the stars. Morrison had made the journey from Earth for the victory ceremony, expecting to present humanity's greatest hero to a grateful galaxy. Instead, she found a tired woman sitting alone in the dark. "You should be down there," Morrison said quietly. "You've earned it." "I've earned a lot of things. Not all of them are worth celebrating. You saved trillions of lives, Patricia. You ended a threat that was going to consume the entire galaxy. I also ended a species, completely, forever." Vance's voice was barely above a whisper. "That's not something I want to celebrate." Morrison sat down across from her. "Do you regret it?" "No, I'd do it again if I had to. That's what scares me." Finally, Vance turned from the stars. "We showed the galaxy what we are. Linda, we showed them that the species they feared for 2 centuries was exactly as dangerous as they thought. Maybe more. And now? Now they'll never quarantine us again. They can't. We're too strong, too integrated, too necessary. Humanity is part of the galactic community, whether anyone likes it or not. Is that a bad thing?" Vance was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of everything she had experienced. "They called us when they had no other choice. They asked the monsters for help. And we answered. We fought, we sacrificed, we lost countless good people. And in the end, we won." She looked at Morrison with eyes that had seen too much death. "Whatever else we are, whatever else we become, that has to count for something." On the planet below, the celebration continued. Humans and aliens danced together, shared drinks, mourned their dead together. For the first time in galactic history, no species was alone. Ambassador Kethril stood on a balcony overlooking the festivities, his skin patterns shifting through colors of hope and uncertainty. He had spent 4 years fighting alongside humans, learning their ways, understanding their nature. He had watched them commit acts of terrible violence and incredible compassion, often in the same moment. He still did not fully understand them. Perhaps no one ever would, but he understood one thing now that he had not understood before the war began. The Council had been right to fear humanity. They were everything the surveillance had shown and more. Violent, unpredictable, capable of destruction on a scale that no other species could match. They were also the only reason the galaxy still existed. High Chancellor Yvonne approached, his feathers now almost pure white with age. Ambassador, you seem troubled for such a joyous occasion. I am thinking about the future, Chancellor. The Drekker are gone, but there are other threats in the universe. Other predators in the dark spaces between stars. And you wonder if we will need the humans again. I wonder what happens when they no longer need us. When they decide that the galaxy is better off under their leadership rather than the Council's. He even considered this for a long moment. Perhaps that day will come. Perhaps they will become the very threat we once feared. But today, they are our allies. Our saviors. I choose to believe that counts for something. He turned to leave, then paused. Besides, Ambassador, if we had not quarantined them, if we had reached out 200 years ago with friendship instead of fear, perhaps this entire war could have been prevented. The humans did not make themselves into weapons. We did, by leaving them no other choice but to become strong enough to survive without us. Kethril watched him go, then turned back to the celebration below. Somewhere in the crowd, human soldiers were teaching a group of young Valari an Earth doctor